The story I'm about to tell you happened a few months ago. It still chills me to the bone. Never would I have thought something like this would happen to me, but yet, it did. I turned on the TV and walked into the kitchen. The microwave started beeping, meaning my bag of popcorn was done cooking. I took it out, grabbed the butter from the counter, and poured it on. The butter sizzled down through the kernels to the bottom of the bag. I went over to the couch and sat down. The TV was turned to a breaking news report. Hundreds of dogs from all around Ukiah, New Mexico seemed to have suddenly gone missing. The Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources says that they are looking into why these disappearances are occurring. More on this at 12, said the newscaster. I threw my bowl of uneaten popcorn in the trash and decided to go to bed. It was getting pretty late, and I had a meeting early in the morning. I went upstairs and into my room. My dog Laika, a large golden retriever, was laying on the ground. She looked up at me with sad doggy eyes, before dropping her head back down onto the carpet. "Hey buddy," I said. "What's the matter?" Of course, my dog just laid there aimlessly, staring at the wall. I shrugged and went into the bathroom to get ready for bed. I hopped in a quick shower, brushed my teeth, and climbed in bed, staring up at the ceiling. I emptied my mind and drifted off to sleep. The loud pounding on the door jolted me awake. I shot upright and looked over at the clock. 3:33 a.m., God damn it, I muttered as I pulled the covers off me. I looked over at the floor, where Laika was laying only to see it was now vacant. I sighed and walked out the open door into the hallway. It was dark, and not because there were no lights on. Something felt off. The air felt thicker, no, heavier, than normal. I rounded the corner to the stairs when I was abruptly hit with this awful smell. It smelled like rotten meat. I pulled my shirt up over my face and covered my nose, but I could still smell it. I walked down the stairs and looked around for Laika, but she was nowhere to be seen. Confused, I walked over to open the large front door. Just as I was about to open it, something stopped me. I felt a chill run from the back of my neck all the way down my spine. I shuddered and opened the door. There was nobody there. I looked around my empty front yard. Then I stepped out and scanned the tree line in the back of the yard. There was nothing out there. Slowly, I closed the front door and stepped back inside. As I turned around, I was surprised to see Laika suddenly standing at the door. I leaned down to pet her but stopped. There was something off about her. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but then I started to notice. Her ears were standing straight up, which she never does. Drool and slobber poured from her open mouth, which revealed her jagged pointed teeth, which appeared sharper than normal. I looked at her eyes. Something wasn't right about them. They looked dark and empty, but most noticeably, they looked human. She began to bark and I stepped back. Tripping, I fell onto the ground and scurried backwards. Her bark echoed through the house. It sounded off, almost as if it was her bark, but at the same time, there was a deeper sound to it as well. Something not natural, something demonic. Suddenly her head snapped sharply left, and she looked at me. She looked right at me with those black, lifeless eyes. Then, just as soon as she appeared, Laika was gone. She stood up, looked at the door, then back at me, before wandering down the hall towards the kitchen. Terrified, I ran upstairs and closed the door. I walked past Laika, now laying on the floor of my room, and got back in bed to go to sleep. It wasn't until I had just started to drift off to sleep when I realized I had seen Laika go down the hall, not into my room. Whatever I had seen downstairs was not my dog. It was something else entirely. Flash forward 6 months. One of my clients, a Dr. Ashki Digin, who was a Native American man from the local Navajo tribe, came into my work one Monday afternoon. Before we had started talking business, I had him introduce himself to me and tell me a few stories about himself. One of the stories he told caught my attention. He told a story about an encounter he had with a tribal creature known as a Skinwalker. He said that these creatures, Skinwalkers, were evil creatures summoned by Navajo witches that had the ability to transform into any animal they pleased. He also described the awful, wretched odor that they give off. I was shocked. Now, positive that I had an encounter with a skinwalker that one fateful night, I jumped back from my desk, running to the bathroom. I had no clue what to do. Until this point, I had been told my whole life that monsters aren't real. Now, I know that's just not true. Monsters are real. All you have to do is know where to look. So, for context, I live in West Virginia, and in particular I live in a rather secluded part of the state, so I'm surrounded by trees and such. I have lived here all my life, and I have heard many stories about Mothmen and other cryptids like skinwalkers and wendigos, and with me being one of the oldest of my siblings, I simply dismissed these folk tales. But I would soon be wrong, because in these following days I would be terrified, fearing for my life, and stalked by this supernatural creature. I am 17 and was home alone for a good bit of my summer vacation. As it was getting late, I had to go and turn off all my lights in the farmhouse, and as I was doing this, I happened to look out the window into the tree line. I saw what looked like a pair of glowing eyes, so I took off my glasses, rubbed my eyes, and checked again. It seems that I was seeing things, but little did I know I indeed was not, and this thing would soon be the bane of my existence. The following morning I woke up and proceeded as I normally do, like checking the barn, the cattle, the horses and whatnot, but to my surprise a few of the cows were missing. I simply told myself that I must have miscounted the previous day, but I noticed something strange when I was making my rounds. Some of the fencing was broken down near the cows. I saw tracks leading in and out of the cow pen, and these tracks did not belong to any animal I was familiar with, and I know what tracks belong to what type of animals. So I simply thought it was a mix of tracks like cows, coyotes, and wolves, but out of curiosity I followed the tracks as best I could, leading me deep into the woods, about maybe 50 feet from the fencing. I couldn't help but feel like something was watching me and my every move. I looked around but saw nothing but trees, so I thought that I was just tired from not getting enough sleep last night. I then proceeded to walk back to the farm and put up some temporary fencing like chicken wire, so that later I could come back when the rest of my family was home. Later that night, I decided to go on a walk because I needed to clear my mind, as I just had a rough argument with my girlfriend. So I took out my phone and headphones and listened to my music as I walked in the forest. But as it got darker, I realized I was so deep into the woods, I couldn't see anything or even recognize where I was, so I took my phone out and used the flashlight to guide my way back. As I was making my way back to the farmhouse, I thought my flashlight caught something in the trees. Something like what I had seen the night before, but then before I could get a closer look, it disappeared, just as fast as they appeared. Even though I'm 17, I was still freaked out, so I picked up the pace. I tried to hurry out of there as fast as I could as I was doing, so I was taken by surprise when I heard a loud howling noise over my music, so I paused my music and took out my headphones, and there was again the same howl. But not a normal howl like from a wolf or coyote. This was more deep and scratchy, like if you were trying to yell with a sore throat, and it made me stop in my tracks, freezing for a few seconds. I could feel my heart in my throat as I slowly looked around, trying to see what could have made that noise. I saw nothing but trees then when I was looking with my flashlight, but I realized that it was quiet, eerily quiet, and what broke that silence was a twig snapping, not even 10 feet from me, and it was at that point my fight or flight response kicked in, and I chose flight. I then proceeded to run as fast as I could, given that I wasn't the most athletic, but I had to try because I was truly scared at that moment and was fearing for my own life. After running for what felt like hours, I could finally see where the forest ended and saw the farmhouse lit up from the lights I have yet to turn off. As I exited the forest and hopped over the fence for reasons I still don't understand, I looked over my shoulder to see if anything was following me, and to my horror I saw a pair of dark glowing eyes higher than any normal human height. and me being relatively tall, it freaked me out. I stumbled backwards and tripped over myself while keeping eye contact with this creature. He didn't come any closer because he stopped at the tree line, but I could smell him, and it was putrid and vile, like a rotting corpse mixed with eggs you left in the sun. I know that I wasn't the only one who saw and smelled this tall, dark human-like figure, because the cows were going crazy, but I eventually got them to calm down, and I went back to the farmhouse and turned off all the lights and then walked out onto the porch. I took out my binoculars and looked to the tree line one last time to see if what I saw was real or if I was just tired and hallucinating. But there he was looking at me with those glowing dark eyes. My heart went into my throat, and I stumbled backwards, slamming the door and locking it. I ran up to my room and took the shotgun out of my closet, loaded it and kept it under my bed for peace of mind, and tried to sleep, but it was hard, because every time I closed my eyes, his eyes appeared. Eventually I fell asleep, because I woke up the next morning to the roosters and my alarm, so I did my normal routine, but this time I took my shotgun with me, just in case, and as I got to the broken down part of the fence, I saw that the wire I had put up previous was also torn, and that blood was on it, and the ground probably from a cow it took. I say it because I do not know what I saw last night, but soon I will come face to face with it. I walked into the tree line maybe 10 feet and yelled out, "I do not fear you. You cannot hurt me." In a firm voice, and in response it let out this blood-curdling howl like screech, and I yelled back as I proceeded to run out of the woods and back to the farm, not looking back this time. This was my biggest mistake, however, because come nighttime shit hit the fan. Come nighttime, I locked almost every door and window I can think of and hide in my room with my shotgun, and for 10 minutes it was silent until I looked out towards the tree line to try and see it. But it was closer, maybe 30 or 40 feet from the farmhouse, and I knew it had seen me, because I locked eyes with it and I quickly ducked down. Then I got back up. It was closer this time, maybe 10 or 20 feet, and I opened the window yelling at it, showing that I was not scared of it, but it just stood there, looking at me. I then proceeded to close the window locket and pull the curtains over it, as to not give it any attention, and what felt like hours passed. But soon after I heard banging at the front door, and what seemed like all around me, as well as inhuman screaming and screeching, until I heard all the windows downstairs simultaneously shatter, and at that moment I thought to myself, this is how I die. What happened next still feels like a dream, but from what I can remember, I heard animal-like noises coming from downstairs, and I vividly remember that I heard hooves coming upstairs fast, and I was genuinely fearing for my life at the moment. As it got closer, I could smell it again, that putrid and vile smell, like rotting flesh and eggs that were left in the sun, and it was so strong that it made me almost throw up. I had to cover my mouth to not puke, and to conceal my breathing, but they didn't matter, because it had my scent and found the room I was in. It was at that moment it banged against the door, and I ran to the door, dropping my shotgun in the process of trying to hold it shut, and it kept banging and scratching and screaming. I held it with all my strength until I looked ever so slightly to my left at my dresser. I thought to myself, I need to get this in front of my door, and with all my strength I pushed it in front of the door, which bought me some time, but God knows it wasn't enough. Even with the dresser on its side against the door, it kept on banging and banging. As my mind and heart were racing, I considered my options. I could jump out of the 3rd-story window to my death, or I could go down with a fight, and that's exactly what I did. I waited in that room until it burst through that door howling and screeching, and I aimed my gun at its ugly, wretched face that I can only describe it and as a half-human and half-deer skull with the skin on it and antlers about 3 feet in length, and pulled the trigger without hesitation and racked another shell and pulled the trigger. I reloaded my shotgun and fired off another 2 shells, as it howled and screamed so loud that my ears hurt, and I thought they were going to bleed and burst. But I kept on shooting until it eventually backed off, and I could hear it running down the stairs, howling in pain, and leaving a blood trail. I followed it through the hole it made in my door, chasing and shooting it with my pistol I had in the back of my jeans, and kept shooting and shooting. I chased it into the tree line, and that's where I stopped as I yelled at it, showing that I did not fear it, and that I was more powerful. As I walked back to the farmhouse, I heard it let out a howl, but not of anger or rage, but more of defeat. It started to rain as I went onto my porch, and to my surprise, nothing was broken in my house, except my door, which had a big hole in the middle. When my parents got home the next day, I simply told them that I was the one who caused the hole in my door, because I was in a fit of rage, and they believed it. Even if I got yelled at, I know that I kept my family safe from whatever that creature was, but that was 2 years ago, and while I was still living on the farm, I have since moved out, and now I am attending college. I keep in touch with my family, asking if they have seen any unknown tracks, or if they have heard any strange noises. To this day, I still wonder if it's out there waiting until I return to the farm so it can get its revenge for what I did those years ago. This is an original story by me, so if anyone would like to use this, please contact me first. My name is Noah. I live in Miramar, Florida, but every winter we leave for Colorado to go skiing and celebrate Christmas. I live with my father, mother, and younger brother, Tom. My family has always been a happy one, but everything changed when we went to Colorado this winter. My mother was always a caring woman. She'd give constant hugs without any reasons, with smiles brighter than the sun. And one thing for sure, she loved her family. One very dark night, the electricity went out and darkness was thick. As any normal people would, we had some candles lit to provide us with some comfort of light. You'd have thought that people of our stature would have owned a generator, right? But that's my father's fault. His procrastination caused that. He had been promising my mother an eternity that he'd have bought a generator. We were short on candles though, so my father went and got his keys to drive in town for some supplies. Hoping that the lights would have came back by morning, I went to my room to sleep it out. About 40 mins in a sleep, I heard my brother calling me from outside. This was strange though, as my younger brother was very afraid of the dark and his room was right next to mine.
Noah, come look at this.
My brother hurled. I then got out of bed and checked my brother's room, because there was no way my little brother, who was so terrified by darkness, was outside. And there he was sleeping like an angel. Squeak, the front door slowly opened. I quickly ran downstairs to see who or what had opened door. I went to look downstairs when I barely glimpsed my mother's silhouette going through the door. I could hear her talking.
"Baby, what are you doing outside? Come on in,"
she said. My brain went in shock as I knew that I couldn't be Tom, as I had already checked. Just mere seconds later, I heard the ear-hurting screams of my mother's voice. It felt like a knife was being jabbed in my ears. I ran to the kitchen to grab a knife or something to help my mom. As I rushed out there to what was a gruesome sight, there was an inhumane creature devouring my mother. The stench was putrid, and its eyes were as red as the devil's. Its skin was like fur, like that of a coyote, and its mouth opened wide, like around 25 inches or so. I stood there in shock, unable to move with what was supposed to be a weapon in my hand, a knife to be exact. But against this monster, I guess a knife is useless. Flickering up to the cabin were my dad's car lights approaching. The creature then started contorting. It had changed into my mother's skin, looking exactly like her. My father pulled in the driveway and said, "What are you guys doing out here?"
"Oh, hun, we were just talking,"
the creature said with my mother's beautiful voice. "Dad, that's not Mom." "Whatever that is, it isn't Mom," I shouted. "What are you saying? My son, stop this nonsense," it said. My father simply shrugged me off, saying I need to get back to sleep because I'm talking nonsense. I kept trying to warn him, but he simply dismissed me and sent me to my room. For nights I couldn't sleep thinking of what I'd saw. It made me squeamish thinking of my mother's screams, and how vile it was seeing that monster swallow my mother's body whole. It's been a year, and that thing acts and behaves exactly like my mom. It has all my mother's memories, everything. I've heard of Skinwalker stories before, so I now had an idea of what creature it was. Sometimes I wonder if it was all a dream, but if it's not, I know that out of everything I must protect my brother. At any cost. Anything. This is a story my family told me when I was growing up. We live in a rural community on the Navajo reservation. My aunt and her 2 brothers were home alone, while my grandparents had left for the evening to attend a chapter house meeting. They were in the house, and like many people from the reservation, they didn't have electricity. It had been dark outside for about an hour, and my aunt and my uncles were getting ready for bed. Outside they heard noises, as if someone moving things around outside. My oldest uncle went to look out the front window and saw a figure out by the truck. This was immensely out of the ordinary, because the closest neighbor was miles away. Whatever it was opened the truck door and began to dig through the personal items that my family had left in the vehicle. My aunt and uncles were frightened by the sight and knew that they should take action. They took out the rifle and all steadied themselves to hold it up. They flung open the door and aimed the gun at the dark figure. The figure turned and started to walk towards them, totally unfazed by the weapon. My uncle pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. The figure drew closer and my aunt began to smell something like a rotting corpse. It was so strong it made her gag. My uncle continued to pull the trigger with no luck, and the figure came closer and closer. Off to the distance, headlights were coming up the road. My grandparents were returning. The figure looked toward the lights and started to move away and tucked itself behind a tree near the house. My oldest uncle ran toward the truck with the gun. My grandfather got out of the car and my uncle pointed to the tree. The thing was poking out its head to observe what they were doing. My grandfather ran into the house and over to the stove and grabbed a hand full of ashes and rubbed over the gun and placed an ash-covered bullet into the chamber. He walked out onto the porch and fired toward the tree. Whatever that thing was didn't expect the gun to go off. The gunshot echoed, and the dark figure began running. My grandma chased my aunt inside and my uncles, and my grandfather went after it. There weren't many roads or paths, so as my grandfather and uncles chased after the figure, the truck was bouncing and the headlights were not fixed on one particular spot. My uncle swears that whenever the headlights would hit the figure, he saw a woman. Not only that, whoever it was running on all fours like a bear. My grandfather eventually stopped the truck, and as they neared the ditch that drops about 20 feet, he got out and began to yell in Navajo. My uncle says that he was yelling about a local woman. He yelled that he wasn't scared and that he knew it was her and to leave his family alone. A few days passed, and there was news that the woman that my grandfather was yelling about had passed. I've always been told that if you know who the Skinwalker is, say their name and it will kill them. My grandfather told me a story once as we sat around a campfire in his backyard in the cool night of the Arizona desert. The horizon was clear, and each star twinkled in a purple sky, with a full fat moon hanging low over the mountains. His voice was raspy and gravelly, the result of a lifetime of smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. The fire danced and shined across his wide, dark eyes as he settled into his seat, ready to tell his story. Way back when I was a boy, about your age, he began, I lived outside an Apache reservation with your great-grandfather. He had returned from the war and set about raising horses and cattle on a 100-acre ranch settled between a brambly mountainside, with dirt good for growing thorn brush and not much else. One night, my mother was sick, and Pi and I took a trip into town, about 50 miles away, straight through a dry desert, over a washed-out creek, and some old abandoned farmsteads. The fire sparked, and a log cracked, jolting me out of the story. What next? I asked. Settle down, boy. You'll hear soon enough. I remember it was dark out, inky and thick, with only the lights of our old truck lighting up the road. I remember, too, when the engine began to sputter, and the truck slowed to a jerky stop, guiding the Ford to the side of the road as it coasted to a halt. Stay here, son, as he stepped out into the darkness, shutting the door with a heavy thud. My window was down, and the cool desert air was breezy and felt good on my hot face and neck. Pa was getting water from the back to cool the engine, and that's when I smelled it. Rotten eggs. Strange, I thought, to smell sulfur in the desert. My nose also picked up carrion, like one of them dead bloated cattle that would drop from the heat, and lay there until the crows pecked enough holes in their hide to cause the whole thing to explode. It stunk, and I gagged. My skin started to tingle too, the back of my neck felt itchy, and my face started to get hot. The wind stopped blowing and hung still and heavy, with the stink filling the cab. My heart started beating, and I felt such a fear in me, in my bones, in my chest. Boy, I tell you, I never felt fear like this. Not until Vietnam. Not until I saw men dying around me. I locked the door and reached over for my pa's door and saw a shadow bound across the road. Through both dim beams of light, across the partly open domed hood, Grandfather paused. He spit a fat wad of tobacco spit off to his side, and he looked pensively into the darkness. I realized I was holding my breath and gasped for air. The night was cool, but I was sweating and clammy. Well, what happened? What about your father? What did you see? He sighed, a creature. He shook his head. You have to understand, there were legends, older than the rock cairns out in the valley, older still than Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, than the old Injun chiefs and their shamans, the Apache and Hop and Cherokee, and all them old tribes and first peoples. They told tales, old stories, about dark Injun magic, a deal made with the old spirits of blood sacrifice to gain power, old power enough to fight each other, and the Spaniards, and later the white men that came for their land and women. They called them. He paused. Grandfather took a deep breath and bodied forward into his tile. Across the fire and the sky, the desert, the creek, the moon, the sun, and old mountains, he bodied forward. They called them skinwalkers, shape changers. Old warriors resurrected as skinless men, all sinew and muscle, walking on deer legs, with the torso of a man and the head of a coyote, but messed up boy long and malformed snouts, teeth like a bowie knife, long arms and standing 7 foot, even hunched over. They'd got the old cowboys and white riders. They'd run through bullets and sabers, part the Spanish armor like it was a potato sack. Wily too. They could change their voice to match a person you knew or might know. Boy, that's what I saw. Big and fast, only for a second. It ran across the road, grey and mottled, muscle flexing under its legs, hooves clomping on the road, stringy muscled hunched shoulders, and it turned, looked right into the cab, looked right into my eyes, and I swear, boy, I swear it grinned at me. I sank into my seat in shock, in fear, shaking. I knew death was near. The air was electric. I smelled ozone and brimstone. The air felt like right before the lightning comes and blows a tree to smithereens, charged and full with power. I yelled for my pup, but no words came out, just a dry squeak. I was shaking as Grandfather told his story. He was still here, so I know he lived, but the supernatural always fascinated me, and even now I felt the force of his words. The real power of skinwalkers was trickery. Sure, they could change their voices, but also their skin. That's why the gods took their hide, so they could take others. Not for long, the legends say. Maybe an hour, before the soul of the skin they wore would come looking for their mortal shell, before going to whatever hell awaited them. Though I think that getting skinned alive was hell enough. A minute passed in what felt like a lifetime, 1 second in 1,000 years. My father's door opened, and I jerked my head to the left, putting my fists up to fend off attack. Son, it's me, my father said, before climbing into the cab. He grasped the steering wheel and pulled himself in awkwardly, jerking himself into the seat. I cringed into the corner. I looked at him. I looked hard. Your great-grandfather was a good man, treated me and Mima right. He fought the Nazis and saw the worst of man in Poland when he freed all them camps. And now I was taking his measure. Is this my father? Do I make a run or do I die? Is it him or not? Let's go get that medicine for your ma, as he pulled the truck into gear and pulled it out onto the road, and our trip resumed. I guess it was him after all. But how did you know? Was it because he said something about your mom? No, boy, I knew, because out the window, out the corner of my eye, I seen that beast running 50 miles an hour right next to the car, looking at me with them yellow eyes and grinning mouth. I looked and saw it, hunched and angry, running next us, boy. My pa kept his eyes on the road, locked straight forward. Son, he said, don't look at it, don't look at it. That's how I knew, boy. Sometimes when you tell scary stories to the dark tells you scary stories back. I don't appreciate it, I don't much like it, but it happens. The words, soft as they may be, like spongy placenta mushrooms, pushing their way into my ears, leaves me wishing I'd never been born. And I don't appreciate that at all. It was a night, that is all. No light, absence of it, as I sat there again, telling stories to the abyss absent-mindedly. One about the dog with tails for eyes. One about the witch who was never born, but died anyway. The third I can't remember, but it lives on anyway, somewhere. The dark cut me off rudely. Jennifer spoke. Those stories are all rubbish. What are you, 6 years old? Yes, I spoke back. I am 6 years old. That explain it then, it sighed coldly. We need more blood, more death. Dangling entrails. Eyes squished between fingers. I nodded. Mom won't let me tell those. Leave that to me, little one, the dark hummed. I'll tell you one that'll make your heart crawl out of your chest like a fat, leaky tissue toad. And so I sat back and let the dark tell me a story, gnawing on my fingers in anticipation as spindly words danced from the outards into the innards. My eyes felt sweaty, my brain swollen, my heart all tissue toady, but I endured. So you see, Jennifer, the dark sang excitedly, you can pull the entrails from the body inch by inch, but at the end of it, there's a little creature, a wee writhing homunculus, aching to replace the host. You must put it back, or snap its neck right then and there. Those are the rules. My eyes felt heavy, like they wanted to roll out of my sockets, and my tongue was tied around my ovula in a complicated knot. One more before bed. The dark winked ominously. But this one is not for the faint of heart. So you better put that flesh lump away for now, lest tiny muscle, cyst spiders crawl out of it. This one is about the Skinwalkers. I hid under my covers, convulsing like a worm-filled effigy, as the dark told me about the horrid existence of the Skinwalkers, and once more I was left with an intense desire to have never been born. It's just a story, right? I asked when the dark had finished the tale. Just make believe. The dark laughed. Oh no, Jennifer, it spoke. They are as real as you and me. Eyes dulled by tears and clotted blood, I held my hands up before me, observing as the intricate web ways of veins pulsated in the deep red of the oozing flesh. Bee-boo, but it cannot be, I stammered. Such horror, it cannot be. But it is, the dark chuckled. Unlike you, they wear the skin on the outside. That's why we call them skin walkers.